Colleagues, I'm not sure if I'm the last speaker tonight, so I'm between you and your committee or dinner. I'm going to start with just 4 words. Kindness, leadership, courage, and hope. That's what I want to talk about today. Kindness, leadership, hope, and throw in some of that courage and grit, and the needle will move. Change will begin. Action happens, that is for sure. So let us start with kindness. That's a beautiful place to start, so let's start with Senator Mary Coyle. It's indisputable, one of the kindest of humans. Today I want to acknowledge Senator Mary Coyle, an extraordinary leader who shines a light on critically important world issues as a top-tier public servant. That's what matters to her, I believe. She is relentless in her quest to move that proverbial needle that I spoke about, steeped in values for the people of Canada, coast to coast to coast. If I may, in fact, say, and I'm stretching a little bit of fact here, it's exactly 1 year ago today, more or less, that I was a newly minted senator, not yet sworn in, and I think you know where I'm going to go, Senator. And I remember it clearly. I was wandering the awe-inspired halls of the East Block, a little lost, no doubt, not just on how to get to my temporary office that was in the actual basement of East Block beside the boiler, which Senator Ince will know intimately because we shared that office. So I was a little lost, no doubt. And I was thinking, so here I am. Do I even belong? And where do I even begin? And perhaps it's not miraculous, but I kinda like to think it was. Out walks Senator Coyle from her office, and her kindness extended into an invitation to meet, my first real in-person meeting with a senator as a senator about Senate business. So I'm not going to channel my inner Sally Field here, if you know what I mean, but that meeting did 2 things for me. I started to see how I belonged, and I saw where to begin as a member of the Senators for Climate Solutions. So I will be forever grateful for that day of inspiration. And from her kindness comes the leadership I spoke about. Strong, thoughtful, inclusive, wide-ranging, and relevant. So there's words that are leadership. And your work matters, Senator, a lot. Your inquiry matters a lot. Climate is very real. You don't have far to look to see it and be impacted by it. In fact, I'm going to look back to April 24th, just a week ago, the Globe and Mail article, and I'm going to quote these couple of paragraphs. Under the midnight sun, on July 14th, 2024, Kevin Are was at Shingle Point, a summer coastal camp for Inuvialuit, and I did so perfectly, thank you, Senator White, families on the Yukon coast of Beaufort Sea, when he was stopped in his tracks. There in the ocean was a beaver. Mr. Are is an Amaruq monitor whose job it is to protect fish, wildlife, and traditional land in the westernmost region of Inuit Nunavut, the Inuit homeland in Canada. He goes on to say, growing up, he had never seen a beaver on these lands and waterways, and certainly never in saltwater. They're everywhere, every square inch on the delta. New research confirms, driven by climate change, North America's most famous rodent is moving into the far north, with cascading consequences for waterways, wildlife, and a way of life. I end quote. Leadership is required. I look around this chamber. It is staggering how leadership flows from every seat, from each one of you. Years of leadership, unique experiences, and yet we all have a common goal. Regardless of where we sit in the chamber or why, that common thread is public service, working on behalf of the people in Canada. You all know You show it, you live it, I see it, I feel it, I respect it. And not to discount it in any way, shape, or form. Yet that is exactly what I expect from the senators in the Senate of Canada, leadership. Not to discount it in any way at all, yet it's the obvious place to look for leadership, the Senate of Canada. Sometimes, though, it's the not-so-obvious place where I have found something a little bit more. Sometimes the boat needs to be rocked. The needle needs to move in a different direction. And you know, if the needle moves 1 degree, folks on the Maritimes know, coast to coast to coast, if the needle moves 1 degree, the ship moves 1 degree, the direction changes. So, what I'm asking us to think about is untethered, innovative thinking, unencumbered by protocol, with bravery and grit, voices perhaps quieter than ours, but maybe more fiercely determined because they see a future that is theirs to shape, but not in their hands. Leadership, youth leadership, from all the communities we serve, extraordinary leadership, brave and fierce. That is the leaders of the Canadian Youth Climate Assembly. Many people describe young people as our future leaders, always with warmth, care and kindness, of course. Sometimes, my friends, a bit performative, acknowledging our future leaders. Young people, the future leaders of our communities, our country. I categorically and absolutely disagree with that. I disagree. They are absolutely not our future leaders. They are leading today. Where it is obvious or not, young people in Canada are showing extraordinary leadership today. I have had the privilege of working alongside young people several years ago for many years. With youth leading the way, the digital e-mental health space was literally reshaped. And it was not rocket science. It was simply good, common business sense. I looked around a board table at Kids Help Phone, still plugging here, the only 24/7 e-mental health digital solution for young people in Canada. In 2017, I looked around and I wondered, how is this table of mostly bankers and lawyers from Toronto or some of the big business hubs across the country, how are they going to lead with clarity on behalf of young people? Aha moment. They should not lead on behalf. What they should be doing is leading alongside and with young people. So quite simply, here's where it's not rocket science. We changed our bylaws. That's quite simple. To require an ex officio voting member on the board of directors and every single standing committee of that board to have a member from our National Youth Council. If not, the board would be out of compliance. And that is a really big governance deal. So at the same time, since we did that, opening up bylaws, we did the same thing for our Indigenous Advisory Council and our Black Advisory Council. Onto the board as ex officio voting members. Note 50% of all of those councils are youth from coast to coast to coast. So what happened from that? Youth co-created every single service program. Youth shifted the strategic direction of a national organization. They showed up at these lofty governance tables, prepared and ready to serve, and used their voice with courage. And can you imagine being in first-year university, sitting around a table like us? That was pretty intimidating, and yet they did it. They unlocked, in fact, the potential of KHP, including its new brand, its foray into innovation. The reason why we moved into AI was because of the youth. And then a global pandemic shut the world down. That's pre-pandemic. And KHP accelerated 250% since then in every part of the business, from the front lines through to funding. That would not have happened without the youth leaders at every decision-making table. Youth are the epitome of leadership then and today. I tell that story because it should not be hard to be inclusive, inviting those that we serve onto the decision-making tables. That should not be hard. And also, folks, colleagues, it's just good business, right? It's a good business decision. Our job as the adult business leaders is not to applaud the leadership from our own seats or warmly congratulate young people, feel proud of them, and then move on. Our job is to bring those leaders of today to the table, to hear them, see them, and ensure that they're at the table to help shape decisions that will define the future for us all. That is why I feel so much urgency and enormous respect for the work of the Canadian Youth Climate Assembly. This incredible group of leaders sat right here in this chamber last fall, in our seats, in our decision-making seats. I kind of love that symbolism. It was a wow moment for me. And you've heard me say, perhaps you haven't, know who you are, and you'll know where you should go. These young people that were sitting in this chamber, they knew who they were, and they knew exactly where the heck they and we should go as on climate. They sure did. The Canadian Youth Climate Assembly matters. It moves the needle. And I love how they laid it out. The voice was clear, their message to parliamentarians clear. Don't just talk about climate change, be accountable to actionable change. The future depends on it. The report that they produced is trailblazing, and it must be considered. The report speaks openly about eco-anxiety, grief, frustration, emotional distress linked to climate change. It reflects a generation that is carrying real emotional weight as they consider what the future may hold. And this matters deeply. Data tells the story. And you know I had to go to data on the impact of climate change to youth and their well-being. A couple of years ago, for the first time, climate or environment anxiety made it into the top 10 reasons why young people were reaching out to KHP and moved to the 6th most significant reason. I just want to give you the magnitude of the numbers. 4.5 million interactions a year. That's a significant number. And that's not a great top 10 list to be on. And by the way, when young people reached out about climate anxiety, they also were most likely to talk about hopelessness. So now, let us move on to hope. My favorite, kindness, leadership, courage, and hope. Because I am filled with hope. I was in this chamber with the leaders of the Youth Climate Change Assembly. They were not woe is me. They had strong ideas. They were not do something for me, not at all. They felt a great deal of worry and concern, for sure, even with a bit of edge of hopelessness. And yet, they were energized. They showed up fully with real solutions and strategy. It is in that report. They were not passing the buck over to the adults or up to people like us. They asked us to own it, just like they owned it as leaders in this chamber. And that is what gives me so much hope. That kindness, courage, hope, leadership. You don't have to look far for it. You just have to look to the young people today. That is obvious. So I thank you, Senator Coyle, and all of the senators for climate change for the work you've done, because it matters. And I thank the young people who sat in this chamber. It's obvious, their leadership. So thank you very much. Merci.